Welcome back to the Tech Time podcast. We have so much to cover today. We're going to talk about Apple's event, how they announced the new iPad Pro, the new MacBook Air. We're going to talk about the OnePlus 6. President Trump's iPhone got hacked, and maybe some rumors about the Galaxy S10 coming out next year, and about Apple's stock getting slashed by 10%. So we have a ton to go through, but first I want to know, how are you doing, Matt? Are you having a good time in Canada?
Oh man, we are in a frozen winter wonderland. We've had freezing rain all week. Car accidents left and right. It's almost like everybody kind of forgot how to drive throughout the beautiful summer that we had. Well, it's that way all the time. It's not that bad, but yeah, it's time to get the winter tires on, and like right when it just starts getting cold, that's when you get all that ice that just builds up because it freezes and thaws, and yeah, it's bad. But anyways, we'll get through that, and we'll be back to the beautiful winter paradise that we're known for.
You know what terrifies me about winter driving is the traffic circles you guys have.
Yeah?
So I just remember one time I was taking the first exit and I just slid right on through.
Really?
Trying to pump the brakes, and I was just turning and spinning. There's cars everywhere in the traffic circle. So here in the States, we do have traffic circles. They're just one lane, never two lanes, at least in the city that I'm in. And, no ice at all to speak of.
Yeah. You know what? Two-lane traffic circles are the way to go. The problem is most people don't know how to use them. And so...
You got to signal.
The dangerous part about it is people changing lanes in the traffic circle, and you're like, no, stop. Or people going too far when they're in the outside lane. And I mean, the problem isn't with the design. The problem is with people who don't know how to use them.
And, absolutely. And I'm going to save everyone's lives here that are listening right now that might visit Canada or Europe. If you're in a traffic circle and you're not taking the first exit, use your blinker light to the left. And that way people will know you're not taking the first exit. So there you go.
And
save some lives.
Always yield to people who are on the what side? Inside or outside, Dan?
The inside.
Bueller.
I don't know.
Yes, you always yield to
Is
the
it 50-50? Yeah. Is it heads or tails?
But just always be aware when you're in a traffic circle. What's going on around you? Yeah.
I'm just going to be looking to the inside the whole time. Imagine doing it the opposite in the UK, going the opposite direction.
Oh, yeah.
Which way would it be then? Inside or outside, Matt?
Remember National Lampoon's European Vacation? And they're like, look, kids, Big Ben. And then they keep driving around because they can't exit. Look, kids, Big Ben.
That's when you just keep driving.
It will still yield to the inside, even if you're driving the other direction.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
You just keep driving until 2 a.m. when no one else is there, and then you run away.
And then run away. But signal.
Signal. I had a pretty cool weekend. We actually went to Havasupai. So for our listeners that don't know about that, it's the Grand Canyon. There's this giant waterfall that has these majestic blue waters. And in February, you can actually reserve a campsite there. And you have to hike down with your packs. And, I was so lazy on the way up, I just bought a mule to take all my packs up to the top. And then that way I could just hike the 10 miles without a 30-pound bag on my back. So it was pretty cool. You'll have to check out our Instagram and our Twitter for some pictures on that.
And the mermaid tail.
Yeah, there was. Somebody randomly had a mermaid tail there, so there may or may not be pictures of that up.
It's pretty cool.
Well, let's get back down to business. So
yes.
Apple had a big event. Tell us what happened there.
Okay, this was round 2. So the first event was all about their iPhone 10s and the changes that came there. And so this one was their iPad event. At least that's what they focused on. But they also talked about releasing a MacBook Air as well as a Mac Mini. And, Dan, I'm actually a big fan of the Mac Mini. I thought it was a really cool design when it first came out, and I was really disappointed that it just doesn't get the same kind of love that other Apple products get. So I was excited to see a little bit more love coming. I wasn't excited about the price because it's still supposed to be budget friendly, and it is still kind of, but nothing it was supposed to be. But anyways, let's get into it. So the product everybody's talking about right now is the iPad Pro. And so as we were talking about through leaks that we had seen, slimmer bezels, absolutely. This is a beautiful iPad. It's a little bit thinner than the previous iPad Pro, but the key is they've slimmed down those bezels. And yes, there is facial recognition with those little infrared dots that come out and map your face. But Dan,
But no notch.
no notch. Hooray.
I'm just going to redesign my game for this right now. Tonight, I'm going to stay up until 3 in the morning.
Yeah, they were able to keep a lot of the, I'm pretty sure, the same aspect ratios. And what's really neat about it is you compare the iPad Pro from last year to this year, and even though the screen size is the same, it's a much smaller footprint because they've slimmed down those bezels. And man, it was time. I mean, those bezels were just killing us.
Cool. I'll tell you what I'm the most excited about.
What's that?
USB-C. That's
Yes.
what I'm the most excited about. And, you know, people were talking rumors about this, and I thought they've got their proprietary lightning cable. No way they're going
Yeah.
to switch because they have all these speakers and, you know, car attachments and plugins. And they're probably making so much money off of those lightning cables. And the minute that they switch it to USB-C, then all of these third-party places, you know, can just use the same cable for their PC as their iPad Pro now, and it really takes away a lot of the market for them. But the positive thing is, now we can use all of our peripherals. You can plug that into basically anything, an overhead projector if you're at school and you want to show a presentation. You can plug it into lots of things that will give it power.
No dongle necessary.
Yeah.
Because we were always buying iPhone dongles. Dongles for your headphones, you'll still need that because they got rid of the headphone jack. I mean, on an iPad, it's big enough. You could put a headphone jack thing.
There's room in there. There's room for that.
And it doesn't have to be waterproof. You're not going to drop this thing in the toilet.
We're both using our headphone jack right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's interesting. They also improved the screen, so they call it their liquid Retina Display. They have 4 speakers. That's pretty cool. So this thing's supposed to kick out some really good sound. They got rid of the home button. That's part of shrinking the bezels, and so it's all about the flicks and the gestures. And to be honest with you, I don't know. I haven't tried it yet, but just from the reviews I'm seeing, not everybody's excited about the new gestures, and it's a little bit harder to get to the multitasking features that we were used to with like a double tap on the home button. So
Right.
I guess we'll see how that goes. So other things that come along with this, and then let's talk about price because that's crazy.
Yeah.
So peripherals. You can buy a new Apple Pencil today.
Woo!
It wirelessly charges. It has a magnetic mount where you just stick it right on top, and so your pencil doesn't have to stick in your ear or up your nose where you used to keep it.
Yeah.
That's cool. What's sad about it is it's pretty expensive. I think it's around $200, and you cannot use the old pencil.
Wait.
or the old
The
iPad.
pencil's $200 or the iPad's $200? The pencil is $200.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's $100, but even then,
Holy cow! That's
still
like
really-
groceries for a month or one pencil.
it's still really expensive. And it's
Yeah.
Bluetooth, and it does cool things. You can tap it to like make it change from like eraser mode and stuff like that. So, but what's sad about it is you can't use your old pencil. If you bought the pencil last year, you can't use it on the new
What?
iPad.
What
Yeah.
are they thinking?
No, you just can't do it. So you have to
Okay.
buy the new pencil. Okay, so another thing you have to buy because people say this is the must-have peripheral is this new magnetic keyboard portfolio. That one is $200.
I saw that one, and a keyboard makes sense for $200. A pencil, in my opinion, is a little bit crazy.
Yeah, and maybe it's 100, maybe it's 150. We'll have to like answer down in the comments below what it really is, but you know, it starts adding up if you're buying all these peripherals. So, first of all, how much does this cost, Dan? Do you know how much it costs to buy a new iPad Pro?
I'm gonna guess $599.
Wrong, Bob. I'm sorry. $1, Bob. No,
$1.
what you've got here, so for the 11-inch, which is the budget-friendly model, $799.
Okay, that's you know.
To be expected, okay? Now, the 12.9 just squeaks under $1,000 for their cheapest version,
Holy.
$999. Okay, How much was the previous MacBook Air? Wasn't that the same price as getting a MacBook Air?
Yeah,
like an actual
yeah, it was
laptop?
$1,000. Yeah,
It's a laptop, all right? Now, that's the budget-friendly version.
so this doesn't come with
the
LTE
12.9.
or any of those SIM card slots.
No.
I see.
Now, you can crank this up to a terabyte storage. You can put LTE in it, and the most expensive, it's $1,899.
It's like my iPad. I mean, my iMac Pro.
Now, slap on that a $200 keyboard. Buy the pencil. Let's even call it an extra $100. You're gonna need Bluetooth headphones unless you want to dongle it up all the time. You're gonna be like around $2,200-$2,300 by the time you're finally done buying this iPad.
Well, the thing about iPads is you can't really create still as well on them. I mean, if you're using this magnetic pencil for $200, maybe you've got some crazy Photoshop skills and can do a little bit of creation. But
Yeah.
all of the creative people I know, they use a laptop or a Microsoft Surface because they need those more powerful applications that, are a little more RAM hogs. And the iPad applications, I just haven't seen them be equal yet. And,
It's the
hopefully-
multitasking too.
it's the multitasking.
Yeah.
You go back and forth. You take screenshots of things. You put it into Photoshop. I mean, that kind of stuff is just harder to do on the iOS instead of the Apple.
Now, this one you can do split screen, so you can have two apps open at the same time, but that's it. You can't have four. You have this massive screen. You got a 12.9-inch screen if you go for the big one, and you can't put four apps. You can't do three. It's two. And what's interesting about this, though, is the chips. They are super high power. I mean, you're talking processing 7 nanos. Like, it is so fast. And
It's so many nanos.
What they're saying, though, is that just running it through the benchmarks, this is a powerful device, but yet it's still, even though it would underperform, say, a MacBook Air of the same price value, it still isn't as functional as, say, a laptop. So all the reviews I'm reading basically say, is it a laptop killer? No. But it is the best tablet you can buy out there. If that's
I'm making a prediction. Hear me, Internet.
Hear me. Prophesy.
Apple has said for a long time that they are not merging Mac OS and iOS. But I'm calling them on it. I think they're going to have to. If they're going to make these $2,000 iPads, they're going to need to merge the two operating systems. They're going to need to have creatives be excited about buying this and creating content on the platform. I mean, I just don't see people creating this. And this seems like maybe something that rich baby boomers would have to, read. But I just don't see a lot of people running out and buying this.
I mean, it's a beautiful device. It really is. But when you look at the form factor that it is and how big it's going to be, if you're going to stick it in your bag, you might as well put a laptop in your bag, right? Like, it's not as amazing as when the iPad first came out. It was way thinner than a laptop and way easier to take with you. And I tried really hard to get my iPad to replace my tablet, mostly by screen mirroring and leaving my laptop at work. And
oh, that's interesting.
yeah, I could do all kinds of cool stuff with it, but no matter how hard I tried, I could not replace my laptop. And even today, which we're talking like 7-8 years later from when I was doing that, we still can't do it. So I agree with you. I think they've got to somehow bring the software experience together between iOS and OS X. Yeah.
Well, speaking of laptops, the new MacBook Air. Now, this is the thing that I was waiting for in the summer. We've talked about it in our past podcasts. I really wanted to buy a new Apple laptop in the summertime, and they just kept delaying it. I kept hearing rumors. Finally, I threw up my hands and I said, I need to buy this MacBook Pro today. And of course, now, months and months later, they have this reasonably affordable laptop. I mean, it comes in at $1,200.
Yeah, that's not
and
bad.
you know, it seems
$200
decent.
more than before. Yeah.
Yeah, I read the benchmarks comparing it to my MacBook Pro, the 2018 with the Touch Bar, and they actually say that for the single core processes, it's pretty comparable. Where my MacBook Pro really beats it is the multi-core. So when are you going to start using multi-core? That's going to be when you're creating YouTube content like we do, and when we are rendering things, or when you're compiling code. It's really for creative people. If you're using Photoshop and you have some kind of an effect that you're going to put in your picture, the multi-core is going to make that go a whole lot faster and process it quicker. But for the single core things, and that's for the majority of people, if you're going to be word processing, if you're going to be using Chrome or Safari to browse the internet, or even if you're playing games, most likely you're not going to tap into that multi-core unless you're using some pretty hardcore stuff. And so I think this is a great deal. If I could talk to myself back in July, I would say, wait until November.
wait.
Because you'll save $600.
The MacBook Air is amazing. Yeah, so it's the 8th gen i5 dual core that comes out with it. You get 128 gigabytes of storage up to 1.5 terabytes. Now, I'm sure that's going to be expensive to stick that in there. And the
128 gigs, though, I mean, that goes so fast. I mean, you basically install your operating system and it's gone. Like, you can't do that. You need to double that at least.
At least. But the big deal is they now have Retina Display. So that's good. That's what they've been asking for these MacBook Airs for a long time. So I think it's going to be a nice laptop, and I think it's going to be a winner for Apple. Mac Mini, let's quickly touch on it, even though it's not the most sexy device that Apple's ever put out. It's going to come
sexy.
Yeah, sexy, 6 cores. That's what it's going to have.
64 gigabytes of memory.
Yeah, and 2 terabytes of storage. So it's got tons of memory, tons of storage, 6 cores, and it comes in at $799. So it's almost double. It used to be $499, so $500. Now it's $800. It's a big price jump, but you also look at what you get with that. You get an awesome processor up to 6 cores and tons of storage. So I think it's going to be great. The portability of taking it with you, a lot of people use them in server farms. I think it's going to be pretty good. I'm glad that they refreshed it instead of just letting it die.
Well, let me talk about the Mac Mini for a minute. I really like it because all of us have keyboards in the garage or in our storage. We all have mice from 15 years ago. We've all got a monitor that just is a flat screen that we don't use anymore.
Yeah.
So here comes this Mac Mini that you can hook up that old technology to, and you can keep upgrading and keep those peripherals that are fine. I mean, our mice and our keyboards haven't really changed in the last 20 years. So I like it for that standpoint because you can save money. Now, who would want to buy this Mac Mini? Developers, because you can't use Xcode on Windows. And it is so expensive to buy an Apple computer just to use Xcode. I mean, you have people that are actually renting Mac computers online just to compile their code.
That's crazy.
A lot of people get older Mac Minis to have Xcode so that they can compile their iOS apps. Now, here's the problem with the Mac Mini.
Yeah.
A roommate of mine has the Mac Mini, but the problem is it's only 5 or 6 years old, and it's not ported anymore. You can't install the latest operating system on it. And I suppose you could say that with all of Apple's hardware, whether it be a laptop, their iPads, their iPhones. You buy one of these and you're hoping you can use your legacy technology. 4 or 5 years, you can't use Xcode anymore. You're no longer able to submit apps to the Apple Store because it really has a shelf life of maybe 4 to 5 years. So that's the danger you run into there.
Wah, wah. I totally agree, and this is the cheapest way to get a Mac, is to get a Mac Mini. And I think they're cool. All right, so what happened since this announcement? Well, Apple stock actually rose. Everybody said, hey, this is great. We think the iPad looks pretty cool. Maybe it's going to bring in some money. Definitely the iPad or the Air, the MacBook Air is going to bring in a whole ton of cash. And so stocks rose. And then Friday. Dan, do you know what happened Friday?
Well, they had their quarterly announcement, their phone call. And it's funny,
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys do for budgeting, but I keep track of my net worth on a quarterly basis. So I've just decided to do it with Apple stock. So I have a spreadsheet, and every time that they do the call in, this is how many Macs we sold, then I just put my, net worth on this spreadsheet. So I knew it was coming up because I was excited to see the difference from last time. Now, what they did was they announced how many units they had sold for each individual thing, and it was actually down. The amount of money they made was up, and the reason why is because they're charging us more for the phones. They're charging us more for the iPads, and so they're making more money, but they're not selling as many units. And so then at the end of the phone call, they announced, we're not going to tell you how many units we're selling anymore. We're just going to tell you the bottom line of how much money we made. And everyone lost their mind because it's not honest. I mean, look at us. We're buying these $1,000 phones, $1,200 laptops. We're buying these iPads for $1,800. And it's making them a lot of money. But what you don't realize is that other companies out of China or Korea, Samsung, they're selling more units and they're more affordable. And so you really have to look at the numbers. And people were not very pleased. That means the next quarterly report, we will not know how many they sold.
Yeah, and so what I think you hit it right on the head, Dan. If they stop talking about units sold, we will lose the ability to track market share. And that's what's important because, they can keep hosing us and the fanboys will keep forking out the cash. But if the fanboys are forking out more cash and the units are getting less and less and less, you will actually have a stock crash as soon as people realize how much market share is being lost. And Apple is the one who is losing market share like crazy. If you look at their market share, they owned the world 5 years ago. They owned it. And then as Android became more competitive and Samsung came in and took over as the number one cell phone producer, and then you've got phone companies like OnePlus and Xiaomi, and out of China, these companies are just growing like crazy because they're affordable. Margins are tight. Apple's margins are great. That's awesome. But they're losing market share. So a lot of people are asking the question, is Apple in the same position today that BlackBerry was in 8 years ago?
Right. Good point. It's so interesting to watch their stock. I remember I sent you and Dad an email probably a couple years ago when it was at $100. And they had that big scandal where a bunch of celebrities, their nude photos were hacked. And so their stock had fallen below $100. I think it was like $98. And I wrote you guys and I said, buy. And if you had bought it, it would have doubled, which is pretty cool. But it's just interesting to see that even this huge stock that everyone's in love with, I mean, it's part of the S&P 500. It's a huge company. Even something as robust as that can still fall overnight by 10%. And so you have to be really careful when you look at these numbers. And I just find it fascinating from an economic standpoint.
So one last thing, and I don't want to beat the dead horse with this, but this is an interesting thing that came out. They announced they were actually going to produce less iPhone XRs. And that's the budget-friendly model of the iPhone X. And I think there's two reasons why they're going to do it. Number one is they showed demand wasn't there like they thought it was. Everybody was forecasting this phone to take the world by storm. The cheapest iPhone X. And it didn't. Why? It's still crazy expensive.
Isn't it still $800 to start?
Yeah, it's crazy expensive. So people are still saying, you know what? I'm just going to get an iPhone 8, which is still, I think it's only $100 less than that. But it turns out that's where the demand is. So Apple said, look, we're going to cut back the iPhone XR and we're going to increase production of the iPhone 8. And as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of an ugly phone for 2018. I mean, it's got a chin like...
But you can get a refurbished one for $499. I saw on Apple's website, an iPhone 8. So that's way better than $799, right?
You know what else you can get for $499?
What?
Add $50 in there, and you can get a OnePlus 6T. But and brand new with a tiny little notch with the greatest processor that's art. I mean, okay, we won't talk about that yet. But let's first talk about another company that was all guns a-blazing.
I can't wait to tell you about this.
Tell me about this. I'm
a frequent Redditor, so I'm always on Reddit seeing what's going on. And yesterday, people were losing their minds over Blizzard. So Blizzard has this thing called BlizzCon where they announce new things. I don't know if you remember this game. Did you ever play Diablo or Diablo 2?
Of course I did.
So this
I'm
was
a child of the 90s.
Yeah,
okay?
This is kind of a 90s thing. You know, Diablo was kind of fun. And the cool thing about it is you could do multiplayer. You could really get into the quests. People just love Diablo 2. And Diablo 3 actually did pretty well as well. And as soon as Chang opened, he used the word mobile, and everybody's brain melted. People lost their minds. Boo! He actually got booed at his own BlizzCon. So
Within seconds.
It's like if you went to Comic-Con and booed Spider-Man. I mean, nobody would do that, but people were so angry. Later, they had a questions and answers session where people could go up and ask questions. And one guy said, "Is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?" And everybody laughed. And it's funny, on Reddit, there's memes, there's videos of just hilarious things of people making fun of this. And, it's really funny. People wanted the actual PC game, and I've seen that recently. A lot of people are heading back towards PC games because of Steam. People want their powerful processors. They want their big screens to play these games. And basically, these hardcore fans did not want a mobile game. Mm-hmm. Here's another problem with it. This mobile game is basically... being made by a Chinese manufacturer. It's basically a Chinese game that's just kind of being made into Diablo, and people are furious because the controls are the same. Everything looks the same. There's just no originality to it.
I think it's really actually sad. This is a computer gaming company. Now, where's the cash? Of course the money is in mobile. Of course. Why? Because little 6-year-old kids are racking up mom and dad's iTunes credit card because they're buying all these little extra things so that they can beat their buddies in Fortnite or whatever. Well, actually, Fortnite's one of the ones where you can't pay to win. But a lot of people pay a lot of money and pay to win, and we talked about this earlier about some computer games going that way and people are losing their minds. But this is another example of a company chasing the buck and leaving behind what they're known for. And what they're known for are great, amazing, and game world altering PC games. World altering. I'm telling you, these games like Diablo and World of Warcraft and many of their franchise games changed the way people play video games. And it's like, of course they should be booed. It's like they're walking away from what they do great to chase that almighty dollar. It was just like when EA with Battlefront 2 started putting all those microtransactions and pay to win, and everybody went, boo, we don't want this.
Well, that's the thing is, as a corporation, you really need to listen to the consumer. What do they want? And you need to cater to that, which actually brings me into the OnePlus.
Yes, tell me about it.
That is a corporation that's not necessarily listening to their fan base. Look, they have really great things, and like you were saying, you can get their flagship for $650, which is much cheaper than the iPhone
It's actually
XR.
$550.
Well, there you go. Let's go buy it today. But they've made a name for themselves selling devices that really have great hardware at great prices. The Chinese phone maker has also built a loyal fan base, and they're always reaching out to users asking them, what do you like?
Yeah.
How can we improve on this? Well, as you know, with their newest phone, it came out with a notch that people weren't excited about back in March, and then this latest one doesn't have a headphone jack. And people lost their minds again because this is what they want, the headphone jack. They don't want a notch. If you listen to your consumer, that's who you should be listening to, or else you're going to lose a lot of money. And a lot of the fan base is frankly going to go over to Samsung because it's the same story over there, but possibly just designed a little bit better.
And a lot more expensive.
That's true too.
But I got to tell you, people lost their minds when they brought the notch out. And so the OnePlus 6 came out earlier in the spring, and it had a notch. Was it as crazy huge as the iPhone 10? No, but it still was an ugly notch. And I got to tell you, Dan, I really struggled because I seriously considered the OnePlus 6. But that notch just had me going, eh. And Carl Pei said, embrace the notch.
That's right. He wrote that tweet, didn't he? And didn't he delete it right after?
He did. And his fan base went, ah! Like, it was like the Hulk, like, ripping off his shirt. And just everybody went insane over it. Now, I got to tell you, have you seen the new notch that's on the 6T?
Much better, right? It's a teardrop notch, yeah?
Yeah, it's so tiny. Now, if you got to have a notch, it's the way to go. I'm still not a notch lover, but on a scale of 1 to 10, where the iPhone 10 is a notch that makes you rage like the Hulk, the OnePlus 6 was probably a 5 or a 6, and the OnePlus 6T, this new one's probably a 2 or a 3 on a rage scale of 10. So it's really small. It's not nearly as obtrusive, but it's still there. But still, if you got to have a notch, I think it's the best implementation we've seen to date. So this all got announced, and of course it has the first under-screen fingerprint sensor, which we were talking about last week. And it's optical, so it takes a picture of your finger, and that's how the biometrics work. It's slightly slower. It's a third slower than the optical sensors that most fingerprint readers have. So some people say they notice it, some people say they don't. I prefer to have that fingerprint reader on the front, especially when it's docked in my car, so I can just unlock and go boop. And, you know, even though I have Samsung and it has Retina Display, I find myself staring at my phone while I'm driving, like, you know, trying to get it unlocked. And that's not very safe. So.
Especially with all that ice.
Yeah. One thing we did say, one of the rumors that didn't turn out to be true, is that it would have expandable memory. It doesn't. But it does have great cameras. The cameras aren't much different from the OnePlus 6 that came out earlier. You still got a 16 megapixel front camera. You have a 16 and a 20 megapixel on the back, and you have great night mode. I don't believe that they have optical zoom, which is what I really look forward to when I have two cameras. But I think it's a great phone and the best price that you can get out there for
all the flagships.
Yeah. The only thing this phone does not have is proper waterproofing.
What?
And well, it's still you can drop it in the toilet and you'll be okay, but you can't drop it to the bottom of a swimming pool for half an hour like you can with all these other phones. It doesn't have that same rating, even when they got rid of the headphone jack. So, you know, that's part of the problem with it. And it also doesn't have wireless charging. I'm pretty sure that's one of the issues. But you give up wireless charging and that extra waterproofing, and you shave off $300-$400 off of the price of a cell phone.
That's huge.
You can get, and they're no longer calling it a flagship killer. They're calling it a flagship.
Great.
So it is right up there with phones like the Pixel 3, the Samsung 9, the iPhone 10. Does it have all the bells and whistles they have? No, but it comes pretty darn close for a fraction of the price.
Yeah, the processor's screaming fast. The cameras are pretty good.
Yeah.
And now that price is really great.
The price is fantastic. In my opinion, I think this is by far the best OnePlus phone that we have seen. And, you know, we'll see. It actually looks like it's quite popular, and the fact that it's going to be released on T-Mobile. Oh, Dan, did you hear how much money you can buy it for on T-Mobile?
How much?
You can. So it's $550, and you
Okay.
can get $300 off by trading in an old phone.
Any phone?
Not any. They got a list, but they go way back. Like, you can go back to a Samsung S5. You can go back to an iPhone, I believe, 6. And you can go all the way back to a OnePlus One or a
Whoa.
OnePlus X, which my son has. I think I only paid $250 for it, and you still get $300 credit. So you're paying $250 for a flagship phone.
Great. You know what is the problem with T-Mobile, though, is I think their cheapest price that you can get is $50 a month for their unlimited plan. Last time I looked into it.
Yeah.
And, I just do way better with other things. I pay $19.99 for my wireless bill, and it's 5 gigs of data. So it would be hard to get back into that, where you're kind of renting the phone. Is that what it is?
You are kind of renting it, and you've definitely got to do your homework and research. Like, make sure that the cost of the phone is factored into that $50 a month.
That's true.
And see, is it cheaper? So ask yourself, how much would I pay without having this plan of $50 a month? Is it $35? Is it $40? And then is it worth offsetting the price of the phone? In fact, when I bought my Samsung S9 Plus, actually, it was way cheaper to do that, which surprised me. So for the last 3-4 years, I've always just brought my own device and paid a cheaper plan. But when I actually did the math, I said, I can drop $1,000 right now on an S9 Plus and then have this cheaper plan. Or for 2 years, I can only pay, I think it was $500 for it.
Nice.
Plus, I get a trade-in. So, I mean, there were things, you got to do your homework and do your own research.
Cool. Well, that's great. And it sounds like OnePlus might even be among the first to launch the 5G phone, right?
That's the rumor. So Carl Pei made the announcement alongside Qualcomm. So this was a week or two ago, and Qualcomm's making these 5G chips, and they said OnePlus is our first baby that will be coming out with it. So, I think that's great. I am cheering for OnePlus. The underdog has grown from underdog to medium dog.
Yes.
So I'm all about OnePlus growing some more. So let's see how that goes.
So some other exciting news is there's been some leaks about the Galaxy S10. So they're saying it might be bezel-less and notchless. That's pretty cool. How big is your notch and bezel on your S9?
Well, I have no notch, but here, I'll hold it up for you.
Okay. If everybody on the YouTube channel can see this.
And yes, that is an iPhone background that I have on it because I like it. So if you can see it. So the forehead is pretty thin, and so is the chin.
Okay.
But you can see on the forehead, you still have your sensors, you have your front camera, and you have your speaker. And then down here, it's really just the space they need for the screen's hardware that's underneath on the chin. So what they're saying with the S10 is it's going to be bezel-less. Now, will it or won't it? I'm going to prophesy now. I'm going to say the S10 isn't going to quite achieve it. But I think the Note 10 will.
Oh.
They always seem... So it's just like the under-screen fingerprint reader. The Note 9 was supposed to get it, but it just wasn't quite ready. Yeah. So it always seems like they save a little bit of amazing technology, and because they're working feverishly on getting it to work. So I'm going to say we're probably not going to see bezel-less until the Note 10, but this is what the forecast is, or the roadmap for Samsung for 2019. So are you ready?
Yeah, I really want to hear in your current one, where's your fingerprint reader? Is it on the back?
Yeah, it's on the back.
How cool would it be if it was under the screen?
Totally cool. And what they're saying is the new technology is going to be sonic. So the one that we see right now in the OnePlus 6 is optical, where it takes a picture of your finger and then compares it. And that's exactly what these fingerprint sensors on the back, and some of them are on the side of the phone. I like that idea of on the side of the phone. I'm sure it drives left-handed people crazy. But in any case... that's optical. It's taking a picture of your fingerprint. So the sonic is it sends out sound, and it will actually test the depths of the creases in your fingerprint.
Whoa.
And so you get a 3D map, and it's supposed to be way more secure than the optical, where you can actually fake it, right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's neat. So that's the third generation. Now, the other thing that they have to do, there's a few technologies to make it truly bezel-less. How are you going to get the speaker underneath that screen? Well, this technology has been out for a little bit. I believe there's some Xiaomi phones that already do it, and they basically use the screen as a mini speaker so that the screen vibrates and you can hear it. I haven't been able to test it out, but the reviewers say, surprisingly, it doesn't sound any different from a phone that actually has a speaker grill in the top.
Cool.
Yeah, so it makes me kind of wonder, well, does that mean it's going to be a little bit louder for my neighbor who's sitting next to me on the bus? Will they be able to hear my whole conversation? I don't know, but from what the reviewers are saying, this technology actually works pretty good. So another one, so that's called SOD, sound on display. And then they've got finger on display, which we talked about, and then there's haptics on display. We've seen this a little bit in the past. I know Apple played around with it where they were trying to make it feel like there's buttons on the screen.
And they're kind of shying away from that now. I read an article that said they're not really doing that anymore. They're just doing the press and hold thing, and they're not really doing the 3D touch as much as they were before.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more skeptical on this feature. Haptics on display, it's supposed to create the sensation of buttons for games, so kind of like you're holding a controller in your hands. And to me, I don't know if we really need that, right? Like, we've already got virtual buttons. I don't really miss the old buttons. But anyways, that's one thing they're working on. Now, the big technology, this is the one that's blowing everybody's minds if they can actually do this. It's called UPS. Under panel sensors. So what they're doing is they're actually going to put the selfie camera behind the screen.
How is that possible?
I don't know. A screen that lights up, but yet it will be able to take pictures through the screen. So that's pretty neat. And they're talking about putting a 3D optical recognition just like Apple has, but instead of this gross notch that takes up most of the top anyways.
Yeah, that notch sucks.
It's going to fly through the screen at you. So I think that's pretty neat. So to me, that's the game changer. If they can put sensors and the selfie camera behind the screen, we will see a truly bezel-less phone. And who can do this? Samsung already creates most of the screens out there for the phones.
That's true. Yeah.
They make them for Apple. They make them for themselves. They make them for most of the smaller Android companies. So I think LG is making the ones for Pixel right now, but still those screens don't match up to what Samsung can do. So if anybody's going to be able to pull this off, I think Samsung's the one, and that's what I'm looking forward to. If they can get UPS working for the S10, this phone, I never upgrade until after 3 years, but I might be tempted to.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet. Now, I know we normally don't go this long, but I think there's a fun story that I want to hear about that's a little bit political. And being that it's voter day today, will you tell us a little bit?
Yeah. Let's get political. I keep singing that song. We should probably have like a little intro with that when we...
I'll work on it.
Yeah. All right. So... Donald Trump's iPhone is getting hacked by spies. We love talking about spies. We love talking about President Trump. And when you can take President Trump and spies and put them together and make a tech story out of it, this is gold.
It makes our minds melt, like all those people at BlizzCon. No!
So it turns out Donald Trump has 3 cell phones that the NSA has taken apart, made them super secure. I don't know if it launches up to Sputnik and back down. Well, it wouldn't be Sputnik. That would be a Russian satellite. But, I'm not sure how they make it so secure. But one of the features they have is he's not allowed to keep any contacts on those 3 phones. Probably in case somebody picks it up, they can't figure out who he's calling right away, right? So no contacts. So when he calls his buddies, do you think he goes to one of his secure phones?
No.
He picks up his iPhone that he's had forever.
Oh, no.
My buddy here, Bill Gates. Boop. Right? So that's what he's doing. And the problem is that phone is completely unsecure. In fact, with just some simple technology you can get from Radio Shack or The Shack or, whatever they're calling themselves these days, Anybody can go and listen to other people's cell phone conversations. It's not that hard. And so do you think there are spies following President Trump around with their the cup to their ear to the wall? Absolutely they are.
You know, I heard that even there were some reports that possibly China and Russia had already tapped into that phone, which is insane.
Yes, they both admitted it. They even said, of course we do.
How could they even figure out what that phone number is in the first place? People are, really on top of it when it comes to...
Oh, yeah. So basically, Russia said, of course we're listening to President Trump when he uses this phone. It's great entertainment, but we know he loves Putin, so of course we do nothing. So that's what Russia says. China goes, oh, yeah, man, we use it to manipulate him. Because he's got all kinds of business ties in China. So we talk to his buddies and we're like, hey, President Trump's putting all kinds of tariffs on China. Do you think you could soften him up a bit? And by the way, I heard him say this to you about that.
Whoa.
If you talk about this to him, then perhaps you can alter President Trump's policies. So,
if this was a Netflix show, I'd watch it. It sounds interesting. I'd watch this show.
Yeah. So anyways, that's what's fascinating. And then the best part, this is kind of the punchline to the whole situation. Xiaomi, a Chinese company, came out and they were the ones that not only President Trump, but many other Republicans and perhaps even Democrats stopped from Verizon sharing their phones because of security issues. Xiaomi came out and said, President Trump, our phones are secure. Also made in China. Would you like to use one of ours?
Crazy.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that political story there, Matt. This is great. I'm so glad you guys are listening to us on the podcast. If you're on YouTube, please take the time to subscribe and comment. We always write back to our commenters. If you're on iTunes with this podcast, please take a minute and give us a 5-star rating. We will be so happy. And as well as Stitcher or Spotify. And let your friends know about this podcast. You can also reach us at Tech Time Show PC on Twitter and also on Gmail. Have a great one.
Talk in your ears next week.